see, does my mic work? Yes, it does. Thank you for the introduction. Also, thanks to all the organizers of the event and for inviting me here. I had quite a trip. I arrived yesterday night from San Francisco. It's a 10-hour time difference. So it's officially like a 3:15 in the night for me. Yeah, I'd love to share my story with you today. And actually, like the name of the company, ACGTXYZ, it stands for the ACGT are the letters that represent the elements of our DNA. And XYZ is like 3 coordinates, so it's like a genotype, phenotype relation. Yeah, and I'm gonna share how I got to the point starting a company in rare diseases for rare disease research, and I'll share a little bit about the company as well. Yeah, just to start, this is where I was born. It's a city called Wijk bij Duurstede. It's in the Netherlands, and I had a pretty good childhood, not too many exciting things going on. At some point, I started an internet company when I was in high school. So that was my first kind of entrepreneurial project. And at the time, I felt like I started that company in '98, and I felt like, tech is going to be commoditized. Everybody's going to do it. I should learn a real profession, and I wanted to study architecture. So that's what I did. I studied architecture, and this is one of the things I designed, which is like a house that constantly adapts to your needs during the day. So I was completely kind of out of the virtual tech and more in the physical, designing in the more the physical world. But to my own surprise, after I graduated, I kind of got back in tech, in technology, and I couldn't let it go. And it turned out, even after all these years, there was actually only more work in tech and not less. So I kind of dropped architecture as a kind of an idea that I was going to be an architect, and continued on my entrepreneurial journey and founded a few companies in the Netherlands. And then one day I started working on a company called Ding Dong. I don't know if any of you guys remember that app, but we moved to Berlin with Ding Dong, and at some point we made another app kind of as a pivot, and that app was called Tap Talk. And Tap Talk is the product that brought me to San Francisco, where I currently live. And this app was basically personal media. You could stream video messages to a friend just by tapping on their face. So it was kind of a new type of interface. But pretty soon, after I came to the US, I had a little issue with my hearing. And it was kind of unclear what it was, but basically I started losing the hearing on my left side very gradually. The doctors couldn't really find out what it was, and they called it idiopathic hearing loss, which is a fancy word for we don't know what's going on, but you're losing your hearing. So that's kind of creates anxiety, you feel something's going on, something is wrong, but you don't know what it is. So one day, they said, let's make an MRI scan, just in case. It's something we can see there. And I remember, walking into the doctor's office and seeing this on his screen. And as you can see here, I had a tumor, and the tumor was on my hearing nerve, and the tumor was also the reason I started losing my hearing. So that's kind of a shock, right? Like you're, oh shit, I have a brain tumor. Like something you don't think it can happen to you, but it can to any one of us. Like just one day to the next, you find out that this is going on. So after another 6 months, they made a follow-up scan to check if the tumor was growing or if it was stable, and it turned out they saw another tumor on my other hearing nerve as well. So I was like, oh, that's not cool. And they suspected the cause of the first and the second tumor was a genetic mutation, and in a gene called the NF2 gene, which is the name of a disease. And they made a scan of my spinal column as well, and they found a tumor there too. So my diagnosis was confirmed, and I had this rare disease. And after you Google the rare disease, NF2, you see that people can lose their hearing, but also their eyesight and their mobility. So it's a pretty kind of serious thing, and compared to that first tumor and losing one ear, like was a lot more intense. So anyway, at that point I was living in the US, and I had a tumor surgery coming up. So they would like remove this tumor which was growing, and at that point I already had lost my hearing on the left side. And this is what I looked like right after the surgery. It's kind of a pretty miserable experience, but on the other hand, it's great that they can do that. Like they literally drill a hole in your skull and cut the tumor out like in small pieces. So next is like, what do you do when you live in Silicon Valley and you get your tumor removed? Well, I'll tell you, you sequence it. So, for those of you who don't know what it is to sequence tissue, it's basically reading out the code, the DNA, of the tissue cells, so in this case, the tumor. So what you see here, like on the horizontal line, every column represents like one letter in the DNA. So we have like 3 billion of those letters. So if you just print it out, it's quite long. And on the vertical column, you see all the small reads that are like piled up and aligned. Like the way it works is the sequencing machine doesn't read out the 3 billion letters in one piece. It reads out very small parts of your DNA, and you basically get a big bucket full of these small reads. And with the computer, you try to kind of stitch it back together. So that's what you see in this picture. Like friends of mine were into genome analysis, and we were trying to look for other genes that were affected in my blood or tumor DNA that could suggest drugs that might like suppress the tumor growth. So we found something, but also I was interested in seeing who else could do something with the data. So we put up a hackathon, and I basically opened up my data set and kind of organized an event around it. It's kind of got a little bit out of hand. Like we had 300 people hacking on it. Google sponsored it. They gave us 150K in cloud credits for people to run like heavy calculations on the back end. 20 presentations came out, and people basically trying to find make AI models to classify the tumor compared to other tumor data, or find other mutations that are related to the kind of main mutation that's associated with the disease. So it was really inspiring. We also had scientists that flew over, people that actually discovered the NF2 gene. They were present as well. So it was also a great mix of people from different fields that usually kind of don't meet each other. So this is kind of was part of the inspiration for me to take the next step and become more serious about this and try to make it a full-time job. This is a tile I got from my mother. Like, she knows me quite well. This kind of, the main takeaway of the story so far. It's just like, we all encounter problems in our lives, and it's trying to see like, what can that teach you? What can you do with it? Can you help other people with like your unique skills and the knowledge of the problem you encounter? So this is what I keep in mind every day. So for the future, there are a few opportunities. One is the sequencing gets a lot cheaper. Like a few years ago, whole genome would be $100,000. Now you can do it for $1,000. So that will open up more opportunities to create like meaningful data sets. There's all kinds of new biotech in development, like immunotherapies and gene therapies, which can be kind of applied to these kind of problems. The big problem that I want to solve is the last one, like developing the treatment for the disease and bringing it to market. Still extremely expensive process. And especially for rare diseases where you don't have a lot of patients in one particular disease, this becomes a problem that actually prevents therapies from coming into existence. So that's why I started this new company. We go under the name RDMD, and I founded it together with Nancy Yu. She was formerly at 23andMe. We try to kind of build a research platform for rare disease patients that is centered around better care. So just like a little statistics to give you some background about rare disease and why it is such a big problem. Like, from the 7,000 rare diseases, like only 500 have a treatment available. So most of them are still without a treatment. And the other thing is, like, depending on how you count, like between like 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 people have a rare disease. So it's really the long tail problem. There are a lot of them. The chance that you have a rare disease is actually quite significant. The chance that you will have the same is very small, right? So it's really a problem that is looking for a different type of solution. Problems with rare, like, it's pretty obvious, right? You have fewer patients, fewer doctors, fewer researchers, and it's really hard to get enough data on the disease to get started. Like, all the data is kind of scattered around at different institutes. So just like to give you like a very rough overview of how treatments come to the market. First, you have the discovery phase, which is like finding a molecule that might kind of help solve the problem, or like beginning with a technology like a gene editing technology. So that's the first phase. Then you need to bring it to the point that you can put it on the market. And this involves like different steps of clinical trial, like phase 1, 2, 3. And then you have to actually make sure that everybody buys it as well. So this is what like the path of a biotech company looks like. So you would say the first piece is expensive, right? Like finding a molecule, like a treatment, and doing the research. it's an expensive thing to do, but really the second and the third phase are the really expensive parts. It can go like anywhere like 50 to 150 million dollars to bring a drug to the market, and this is why even a lot of potential programs, they fall through the cracks. So we try to kind of reverse that, like start building the resources for the second and the third phase before you even have a discovery or a preclinical compound. So how do we do that? Well, first we center it around better care. So we try to help connect patients to the top specialists in their rare disease vertical. We also help them collect and curate data so they can all build a resource together. And we help them engage in kind of continuing ongoing research. So it's really a place where the top specialists in the field and the patients can come together to do these three things. This is like a screenshot, so when people uploaded their data, like MRI scans, other documents, genome sequencing, genomic testing reports, like we curated and we built like a timeline for them so they have everything in one place. This is also what the top doctors will use to kind of assess the patient and give a consultation. The MRI scans, like believe it or not, but it's still done on CDs and FedExing CDs around. So, in our product, you can just see the scans in the browser. So it saves the doctors a lot of time, like not having to kind of collect all the CDs from the different institutes all the time. They can just go into the browser and check out the scans. And just to give you a picture of how complicated the healthcare system really is there are a lot of different parties involved. So among them, like doctors, insurance companies, tech companies, academic research institutes, the government, of course, regulatory, pharmaceutical industry, and then you have the patients. And if you think about it, all these parties have to work together. It's not an easy thing to do and to align them. They also all have different incentives. So, for example, a doctor gets paid by doing surgery, for example. A pharmaceutical company gets paid by having a drug in the market and people buying their drug. So they're like all these people have different incentives. The only party that has the incentive to really get the disease out of the world is the patient. Like they don't want the disease to even exist. And none of the other, maybe the government, but none of the other parties have an incentive that is that strong. So what we really want to do is put these patients in the center and have the platform be driven by the incentives that the patients have, which is actually getting rid of the disease altogether. And we have some media coverage from a publication called neo.life. So if you want to read more or follow the story, I suggest following that. RDMD.com is also a place where you can find more information. And I have my Twitter handle here as well. So these are actual patients that we helped. They're part of one of the articles. And I encourage you to read it. And I believe we don't have actually time for questions, but you can look me up afterwards. I'll be around. So thank you for listening and good luck with all your ventures.